So my first question is, what was your job during the war?
Okay, I was a military dog handler, which basically just meant that I worked in the canine section. Okay, and various canine people do different things. Back then, that was in the early 70s, 1970, I was over there. And I was in the Air Force. So in the Air Force, what the canine people mainly did was like say this was an air base. Well, around the perimeter of the air base, you had like security guards in towers and bunkers to protect from people coming in to the base. And then out about a half a mile outside of the perimeter in the woods and the jungles, that's where the dog handlers were. We were like the first line of defense for the air base.
So it's pretty dangerous.
For the Air Force, it was one of the most dangerous jobs. Wasn't as dangerous as the guys out on the search and destroy missions like the Marine Infantry and things like that. But for the Air Force, it was one of the more dangerous jobs.
Okay.
But it was fun because I love dogs. I mean,
Yeah.
fun most of the time.
Okay, and how old were you?
I was 19 when I got there, and I was 20 when I got back. I was there from early April of 1970 to early April of 1971. And when I came back, I still wasn't old enough to vote or drink after fighting for a year.
Oh.
So they changed that, of course. Now 18-year-olds can vote, but so that was kind of odd.
Yeah. So you were drafted?
No, I joined the Air Force to avoid being drafted because I thought Air Force, that's safe. You don't have to do anything. You just they'll teach me a good skill. I thought I'd be an air traffic controller or something like that, and it'll keep me out of Vietnam. So I wound up in K9, which is basically a ticket to Vietnam because they always needed dog handlers over there. So
Wow. So were they all canines, the dogs that you handled?
well, they were all German Shepherds back then.
Yeah, German.
Yeah. Nowadays they've got all kinds, but back then we used strictly German Shepherds. Some Belgian Shepherds, which are like that, except a little longer hair. But back then they figured that they were the most adaptable to different climates and everything.
So what do you, where were you living at the time?
You mean
Like,
when I went into the military? Well, I grew up in Johnstown, Pennsylvania, which is near Pittsburgh. And when I first went in, first time I ever got on a plane, I flew to San Antonio for boot camp in, Lackland Air Force Base. And after basic training, I got sent to Orlando, Florida as my first permanent base. There I did basically the same thing. I was a K9 guarding the base, but of course there was nothing really to guard it against. But because we had B-52s, bombers, and refueling planes, and even some highly classified planes, they had to have high security around the base. So that's basically what I did there. And then I also went back to Texas several times for various dog training schools. And then I got my orders for Vietnam from there.
What was it like training the dogs?
It was fun. The first time I went down, we had what they call green dogs, meaning they, like a greenhorn. They had no training prior. They had to be at least 1 year old before the military would take them. And what we would do, we would start off with basic obedience. And also, these were the old, what they called sentry dogs. These guys were just trained to be mean. Just be nasty, mean, attack anything that comes near them except their handler. Although they'd sometimes even attack their handler. But later, then they introduced the patrol dogs, which are the kind that police use that you can walk through a crowd, and they won't bother anybody unless they're attacked or their handler is attacked or if they're commanded. But back then, these were strictly like for military, and woe be to anybody that got near them, uninvited, So anyway, so we would teach them basic obedience, and then we would gradually introduce aggression training to them. And the way we would do that is we would have a decoy, you called them, with like a tree branch or something, come up and start making noise and slapping the thing on the ground and everything. And of course the dog would, look, and as soon as he'd start barking or growling, then we'd praise him up. Good boy, get him, And they learned real quick that that's what they're supposed to do. And they'd become more and more aggressive. And then eventually we'd let them get a bite. Like somebody would put on an attack sleeve, and that decoy would come up and get them all riled up, and then you'd say, get him, and the dog would come up and nail him on the arm, and then you'd call them out, and sometimes you'd have to choke them out because they wouldn't want to drop it once they got it. And then the guy would scamper away. So the dog always won early on. He chased the bad guy away, and then after doing that for a while, then we would have somebody in the big old burlap attack suit and cut the dog loose and let him run up and attack the guy, And just as an aside, my very first day in canine, and this was before I'd ever gone to a dog school, I was an OJT handler on the job training. Well, the first thing the kennel master had me do was get into the attack suit. And they were like big burlap padded suits, okay? And the jacket came down about halfway down your thighs. The legs were padded to about here. Your crotch area had no padding. So if you fell, or if you let that dog get up, you were never going to have kids or anything. And also, there was no headgear back then. And the sleeves, you could move them like this, but you couldn't bend them. So he told me, he says, just don't let the dog knock you over, because if he does, you can't protect your head. He'll chew your head off. So good, Okay, so I caught about 6 dogs that day, one after another. But looking back, it was probably the best thing I could have done. It got me over the fear of the unknown and all that right away. So that was fun. So anyway, so then that was the aggression training, and then the introduced the scent training where they sniff out an intruder, where when you were out on post, what you would do is you would go to the end of your post on what they call the downwind flank. Okay, so if the wind's blowing this way and my post goes from here to here, you would come down here, and if the wind's coming this way, if anybody is upwind of you, the scent cone comes down, and when the dog gets that sniff, that scent, he alerts, and then you say, good boy, get him, and then you slowly ease up, watching to see if anybody's going to jump up at you or anything like that. So they introduce all that, and it's just a series of progressive steps. And then the dog, eventually just becomes highly trained and good at what he does. So that's about how that goes.
How about matching the dog with a handler?
Okay, ideally what they do when you go to a dog school, like down at Lackland where you're training a new dog or something like that, they've got a class full of handlers coming in and they've got a group of dogs there. So what they try to do is match you up by size or closely. You know, you got some dogs are like 60 pounds and then you got some dogs that are 100 pounds. And so, like, for example, the one time I went down there and they were going to try an experiment to cross-train the old sentry dogs into the patrol dogs, which can be worked in a crowd. Well, it didn't go too well, but anyway, they scrapped that idea. But before they scrapped it, I go down there, and I'm a relatively experienced handler by then, and so they're going through, and like I say, how they're supposed to do it is by size, but in reality, they didn't do that. They would go, they'd have a list, they'd say, okay, Adams, you have a dog named Duke. Byers, yes, sir. You know, okay, you have a dog named Buster, you know. And then all of a sudden, the dude stops, and he looks around, and he zeroes in on me. He says, what's your name? And I said, Kurtz. He says, Kurtz, you got a dog named Sam. I said, Sam sounds like a nasty word for a sissy, okay? You know, well, Sam was anything but, as I found out. Sam had torn up, I found this out later, had torn up 5 handlers before me, and he wound up getting me too. All you can see is a little scar there. But everybody else in the class had their dogs out, and Sam wouldn't let me anywhere near them. And I prided myself on my rapport with dogs. I could always make friends with dogs. Well, Sam was having none of it. He hated me, he hated everybody. So the one day the instructor says, well, we need to get that dog out of there. We're wasting time. I said, well, what do you suggest? I said, you see, the darn dog wouldn't let me near him. And so he said, okay. He said, so 2 instructors went around behind and kind of lassoed him, held him out tight, while another instructor snuck up behind and while he's going, got a choke chain over his head and throws me the leash. They said, you ready? I said, yeah. They cut him loose. Well, here comes Sam right for me, you know. Well, I was ready for him, so I jerked him around. No, you know, and he finally settled down. And so I walk him out, and we're all standing out there with our new dogs. And Sam's sitting at a loose heel here beside me. And all of a sudden, I'm watching him out the corner of my eye because they don't like to be stared at, you know, especially a new dog. You don't want to stare him in the eye. So I'm watching him, and all of a sudden I see him smiling at me. He's going, oh, you know. And I said, no. Just as I said no, he had me. And he's like a typewriter, just going. So I strung him up with my right hand, keeping my other hand in his mouth, because I knew it was all punctures so far, and I didn't want to tear it out and lacerate it. So he finally choked out enough just about the time my arm was about to give out. You know, I didn't know how much longer I could hold him up. So I get out, and it's like somebody turned on a faucet. And I'm just gushing blood out of me. So it was in the wintertime, so I stuck my hand into my MA1 jacket pocket. Blood's coming right through the pocket, running down my leg. So I'm trying to get the dog back to the kennel so they can take me to the hospital. So I get back to the kennel, but because they had so many dogs, there wasn't enough kennels, so they had him in a temporary kennel where he was staked to the ground with a doghouse next to him. So instead of just opening the kennel door and putting him in, I had to actually get a collar around his neck to stake him out. Well, my left hand wouldn't move. he had messed up the tendons in there. So all I could do with it was kind of put it on the back of his neck and try to steady it while I tried to get the collar on with the right hand. So meanwhile, the blood's just running down over his neck, and he's going, just slapping it up. That's the only thing that saved me. He was so intent on that I was able to get the thing in, the leash, the prong into the collar. And the instructor says, "Oh, you're going to have to get that tighter than that. That's too loose." I said, "You get it tighter." I said, "I can't move my hand." So they wound up having to tranquilize him so they could get the collar tighter. But yeah, that was the failed experiment of cross-training. And usually that didn't happen, but he wound up, that same dog, I was out of commission for a while. Rather than waste time, they gave him to some poor sap in the next class, and he went up and down that guy's arm, almost killed him, tore his neck up and everything. Then they finally decided this isn't going to work. Sam's not a good candidate for this. But that's the last time I ever underestimated a dog based on his name, you know. Okay, I'm sorry.
That's
I'm
fun.
rambling.
I love that. How many dogs did you handle?
Let's see. First one was Eric as an OJT handler. Blitz, he was the green dog that I went down and handled and trained. Sam, one day. Prince, who I got after Sam, who was a great dog. When I first got to Vietnam, I got a dog named Rebel. Rebel was a extremely intelligent dog, but he was too old. He couldn't hardly walk post with you at night. He'd get too tired. So then one of the guys was leaving to come home, and he had Nicky, and he liked the way I handled Rebel, and he asked me if I'd take Nicky. And I said I definitely would, because I loved Nicky too. He was a great dog, and much as I loved Rebel, he just couldn't hack it anymore. He was too old. So then I had Nicky for the duration. He was my last dog. He was awesome.
What was it like in Vietnam?
Sometimes it was real bad, and sometimes it was fun. You know, like if you weren't actually working, there was a lot of camaraderie with your fellow dog handlers. You know, we'd party a lot and things like that. So that part was fun. We worked from dusk to dawn. That was our normal work day. Out in the middle of nowhere at night, you know. And it could get pretty hairy because not only did you have to watch for the enemy, but you also had all kinds of weird animals. And you'd hear all kinds of sounds. Apes. Just wild boars, snakes. Didn't hear the snakes, but you know, they were everywhere, and they had what they called three-steppers, where if they bite you, you go 3 steps and you're dead. But mosquitoes the size of dive bombers, rice beetles buzzing around, sounded like a airplane buzzing around your head. And of course, you can imagine being out in the middle of the jungle at night with no one around you but your dog. You know, it could get kind of hairy. You were glad to have that dog with you. The dog saved a lot of people over there, a lot of people. And one time, kind of a funny story, Nicky and I were out on post, out in the jungle, and I was taking a break, and I was sitting on this downed tree. It was only about this high off the ground. And I'm looking out here in the direction where if anything bad's going to come, that's where it's going to come from. And all of a sudden, I'm sitting there, I got my rifle across my lap, Nicky's on my left wrist, on the leash. All of a sudden, he hits the leash going backwards. pulled me right off that tree. I did a backward somersault, and as I'm going down, I'm thinking, I don't know what's behind me, but whatever it is, I'm probably dead in a minute, you know. As I roll over onto the ground, I'm trying to get my rifle around into position, and then I see, and it was a big cat, like a panther, and Nikki's at the end of the leash, just going, trying to get at this cat. The cat would have killed him, but the cat didn't know it. He luckily, the cat froze. I was just standing there looking, and then all of a sudden he turned and took off. My heart was going, you know, but good boy, Nick, good boy. So just little things like that were weird, but all in all, it wasn't too bad.
Is there any other funny stories that you have?
None that I can really tell yet. You know, it wouldn't be appropriate for school stuff.
Yeah. Do you have any close friends?
Pardon?
Did you have any like close friends?
Oh yeah. Yeah, when I was up at Pleiku, I had some good friends there, and then one day they transferred 3 of us from Pleiku to another airbase down farther south. And one of my good friends, this guy right here, he was one of them that transferred down with me. And once I got down there, I got to be real close with several guys there. Another guy, I'm from Pennsylvania. I met a guy named Tim George, who was from Altoona, Pennsylvania, which was a rival of ours in football and stuff in high school. And we became real close friends. And then there was a guy from Alabama and a guy from West Virginia. And the 4 of us, we were always together off duty, you know, always partying and just singing and just having a good time. So, yeah, and that's one of the hardest things. The 2 hardest things were leaving your friends and leaving your dog. That being the hardest, the dog.
Yeah. And it was hard leaving dogs.
Horrible. We weren't allowed to bring them back. Back then, the dogs were considered military equipment. And, excuse me, they would not allow us to bring them back to the States. They claimed that that they might bring diseases back and all this, but I know that was crap. They just didn't want to let us. So the dog, once the dog went to Vietnam, he was there for life until he could no longer function or got killed or something like that. He was not coming home. And as a result, it was just horrible. You know, you had such mixed emotions. You wanted to get out of there and come home. And as that date got closer, you knew you were going to have to leave your best friend behind. And I mean, to this day, I still can choke up thinking about that dog because he was special, you know. So it's really tough. I think they've changed it now.
Is this Nikki right here? Which dog is this in the picture?
This one?
Mm-hmm.
That's Nikki.
That's Nikki.
Yeah.
Wow.
He was pretty. Do you remember what it was like when it ended, your service ended?
Well, I remember what it was. Yeah, I do. But when I came back from Vietnam, my parents had moved from Johnstown to Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. So when I got back, I didn't know a soul in Harrisburg. And I couldn't believe how people were. I mean, they hated us. They hated Vietnam veterans. They thought we were all baby killers and just horrible people. When really, when your grandpa and I grew up, America was different than it is now. Yeah, everybody had a strong sense of patriotism. And my thinking, I was not very politically astute back then. My thinking was, if my country calls me and says, we need you, okay, that's the way it is. Well, our generation also was the first ones that started the protesting and all that. Some refused to go into the military. Some fled to Canada. Some went to jail. Some went to Vietnam and died. It ran the gamut. But the way you see military veterans being treated today, very well. They come in to an airport or something, people start cheering them and stuff. That's basically an effect to overcome how we were treated. World War II, returning veterans were treated like heroes. We were treated like pariahs. And now they're back to the hero thing. We never thought of ourselves as heroes, but we didn't think of ourselves as scum either, But so that was tough. That was very tough.
Yeah. And when you were in the service, did you send letters to your family and talk back and forth?
Yeah, there was no telephone communications back then, but you would get mail. It was usually a month late or so, but it would eventually find you. And we could send mail out. I don't have any idea how long it would take to get back, but it was definitely snail mail, and there was no texting, no cell phones, no even telephone service. So the only communication you had for a year was letters. So.
Yeah. And did you miss Christmas and Thanksgiving?
Yeah, they were tough. They were tough. In fact, the one Christmas of 1970, the four of us, I told you, were real good friends. We decided that we were going to get a hold of the ugliest shirts that we could. And they had a PX on base where you could get certain supplies and things, and they'd even have a few civilian clothes. Not that we wore them, but so we were looking around one day and we saw these hideous looking shirts, and we said, well, let's get them. So, is it?
I like it.
So, thanks. So, the four of us each got an ugly shirt and sat there and partied down outside of our hooch one night, and that was our Christmas. But yeah, it was special because we were family too. It was different. That was mine.
Let me see.
No, don't do that, Mike.
Oh, I love that.
I couldn't throw it away. Tell them how we got it.
Well, what was it, about 3 years ago, I went to a reunion, a canine reunion. It was the only one I've ever been to. Didn't even know, I totally lost track of people for 40 years. And then Facebook started having people contact me that didn't know if they were still alive. So we had a reunion in Nashville, and the one night we went out to dinner, and they said, everybody wear an ugly shirt to dinner. And, well, I didn't do it. But the buddy of mine from Alabama, somehow he wound up with my ugly shirt, and he walks in wearing my ugly shirt, and he won the ugly shirt contest. So,
That's funny.
but yeah, holidays were rough.
Wow.
You would always, you think of White Christmas and no place like home for the holidays and things like that. You'd get very nostalgic, but you had to work. So
you do attend reunions?
I went to the one. They're having another one in San Antonio this year, but I don't think I'm going to go. I don't know. I'm not much on reunions. I only went to one high school reunion, 10th year. My 50th is this year. I'm not going to that either.
Were you awarded any medals or citations?
Nothing heroic stuff. Just your typical service ribbons and, expert marksman and stuff like that. But I didn't win any stars or anything. Just kind of boring.
What was your rank?
When I left Vietnam, I was a sergeant, buck sergeant, which means I had 3 stripes. And but I didn't even get that 3rd stripe until like a couple weeks before I left. I think that was kind of a deal that they okay, well, he's going back to the States, we better give him his next stripe, So yeah, it was called an E4, Enlisted Man 4. And all it meant was that when you got back, you weren't treated as bad as the newer recruits were. So there was that.
Did you ever see any enemies?
Any enemy?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes. Usually they try to avoid, if they knew there were dogs around, they'd try to avoid us, which was good, it wasn't a constant thing. But what we did deal with more than one-on-one fighting was a lot of rocket and mortar attacks. They'd lob rockets and mortars at us all the time. And of course you can't fight back against that other than, call it in and have your artillery, try and take them out before they could keep getting us. But the regular, one-on-one kind of fighting, it happened, but not something that people like to talk about.
Yeah. Did you feel pressured or stressed at times?
Oh yeah. Sometimes we were 19. A lot of us, the average age was 19. So the government knew what they were doing. And when you're 19, you're too young and dumb. No offense now, but looking at it 50 years later or so, we were too stupid to be as scared as we should have been, maybe, and they know that. So that's a good age to send somebody to war, because they know that you're going to want to be there for your buddies, and, everybody's going to stick up for each other. But yeah, when things get heated and things are happening, yeah, like anybody else, you get scared, and it can get hairy.
After your service, did you go to work, or did you go back to school?
Afterwards, when I got discharged in August. January, I started college, because I went into the military shortly after high school. So yeah, then I went to a community college for 2 years in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, and then finished up 2 years at Penn State. And good thing about that was I had the GI Bill, and between that and a scholarship I had, from the state of Pennsylvania, it was kind of like my tuition was paid, and I even had like a small part-time income, So it worked out well. Yeah.
Some questions. Do you have any exciting experiences?
I don't know. I mean, every night was kind of an adventure, I don't like to get into the war stuff, but I remember one night when Nikki and I are walking along, and all of a sudden heard something coming through the brush, and I thought, uh-oh. And I'm kind of crouched down, waiting until I see what it is, you know. And then this humongous wild boar came across right in front of us. But, you know, you're sitting there going, okay, that's good. You know, I'm glad to see it's just a boar, you know. I saw a boar one night that I thought was a horse. It was so big. And I couldn't believe it. I thought, what's a horse doing out here? Because it was outlined against some sand, and I could see how huge it was. And then Nicky started barking at him. And then he took off down over a ravine, and I lost him. But the biggest boar I've ever seen. One time up at Pleiku, I'm walking along, and I'm walking, and all of a sudden I stop. I think I heard something, you know. Looking, you know. Nothing. Start walking, I start hearing it. Like somebody's stalking me or something, you know. So I stop again, it stops. Next thing you know, imagine the loudest, shrillest woman's scream. Like, you know, blood-chillingly. It was an ape screaming, and it sounded like a woman screaming. I mean, it chilled my blood. And I thought, oh man, you know, what's going on? It's not enough that you have to worry about the enemy, but then all these creatures, you know. But that's one of the weird things about working all night in the middle of, you know, without anybody else with you except your dog.
That's having Nicky around was a lot of company that you had.
Pardon?
Like having Nicky around was good to have company.
I don't know that I could have done it without. He, you know, it was, and like I say, he became your best friend. Your dog was your best friend. So, yeah, I wouldn't have been nearly as brave without him.
When you got off duty, did you and Nicky stay together, or did he go to a kennel? Or?
We had a canine section where they had kennels for all the dogs, and we'd put the dogs up. What they'd do is they'd have like deuce and a half, 2.5 ton posting trucks would come out and come to the closest place that they could get to near where the dog handlers were. We'd work our way back to the posting truck, lift the dog up onto the truck, climb up on, and then they had bench seats on both sides. Then once we got the truck full, back to the kennels, you'd unload, put your dog up, you'd go back to your hooch and sack out on the cot, or else go drinking before you sat down on the cot, you know, unwind. Mm-hmm. And yeah, but no, the dog didn't stay with us 24/7, just about 10 or 12 hours a day. And again, that might be different nowadays, but back then, that's how it was.
So, would you ever do this again? Like,
Did I what?
Would you ever, like, serve again?
If I had to. I mean, I'm too old. They wouldn't take me. But, yeah, I mean, if we were attacked and I could help, I'd do what I could. But at this age, it's not much. They figure I'm pretty worthless at this age.
Would you encourage young, like, men and women to go serve?
I would, with mixed emotions. You know, there's nothing pretty about war. There's nothing, you know, good. Like that old song, what is it good for? Absolutely nothing. You know, but sometimes it is necessary. And if necessary, yeah, I would encourage I have 2 sons. Neither of them went into the military. If they would have, I'd have been fine. What, honey?
You encouraged my brother.
Well, she has one brother she's the oldest of 9 kids. And she has 4 brothers. Only one of them went into the military. And he was the one that used to pick my brain all the time, ask me to tell him stories and everything. And he wound up going into the Air Force. But, yeah, I today you see all these people coming back without legs, without arms. And back then, people just bled out on the battlefield. You didn't have as many people coming back, without legs, because they'd die from loss of blood before they could, get to a hospital. But, excuse me. So yes and no. That's a cop-out answer, but I just, I hate war. I hate it. I would hate to encourage somebody to go unless we were under attack or it was imperative. Then I'd do anything I had to do because I do love my country.
Yeah.
And I think that's a big problem today. People don't love their country. And at this rate, there's not going to be a country to love before too long, because if you won't fight for your country, country's going to fail to exist after a while.
Yeah. When did you meet your wife?
When did I meet my wife? At Harrisburg Area Community College, where after I got discharged from the military, I was sitting in the student center one day, and there was these 2 other girls that I knew, and the 3 of us are sitting at a table, and all of a sudden Patty comes walking up. She knew the other 2 girls. Unbeknownst to me, they had been telling Patty about me, but I didn't know that. And she came up, and back then I had long hair, probably about the length of yours, maybe even longer, and a beard. And she came up, and they introduced us. I thought, whoa, yeah. I guess she liked me too, and she went home. Yeah, if you want to hear this.
Yeah.
She went home.
Danced around the kitchen. I danced around the kitchen saying, telling my mom I was going to marry him. And she told me not to talk so dumb. And sure enough, that was September 22nd, and we got married New Year's Eve.
Now, Grace, this is not how you do it. I understand now. It worked for us, but that's not the way to do it.
Well, that was a fast engagement, wasn't it?
Hey, hon, if you would, when you get a chance, would you go up and get that picture off of our
Okay.
thing?
Well, this has been great.
And do you have any grandchildren?
I have 3 grandchildren. They all live up in New Jersey now. They were down here, but they moved away about 16 months ago. Yeah, Josh, my oldest son, got a job up there, and he moved up there. And Patty just came back from visiting them. But yeah, they've been gone a while now. So, but they're the only 3 I have. My other son in Texas, he doesn't have any children. He's not married. And my daughter has never been married. She's my baby, and she's 37 now. And she's very, very independent.
My dad was not very happy
That's
either.
like some of my pictures.
Yeah, the first time I went to pick her up,
He thought we were
I
having a
walked.
party.
well, I walked up into the house. When I finally found the house, her directions are not her strong point. So I get in there, and there's a guy laying on the floor working on the washing machine. I figure out must be the serviceman or something. Well, it's her dad, but he won't even acknowledge my presence. And then
He said,
we have a wedding picture somewhere where he's walking her down the aisle, and he looks like he could spit nails. He's so disgusted. He just thinks, oh, this can't be. I'm not gonna turn her over, my little girl, over to that, freak. And,
Goes along here.
but he grew to love me, and I mean, we had a fantastic relationship.
Yeah.
But yeah, she told her mother the day she met me that she was gonna marry me.
Well, you know how I knew? There was this like aura or something around him.
Yeah, she
I
tells me I
honestly
had an aura.
I-
Hard to believe these days, I
I
know.
was
But
not interested in them. I was 25. I wasn't a kid. I never did date much, and I just thought I didn't want to date. But, I loved you.
she's always called me her Prince Charming. And she says I still am. And I said, I told somebody one time, I said, looks like Prince Charming put on some weight.
Is there anything else that you want to talk about?
There was one thing I thought about before. Again, when you get to be our age, this happens, you totally forget.
I forget everything.
Yeah, I don't know. I can't think of it, but
Well, this has been a great interview. I'm so glad I got to interview you.
yeah, I am too. I mean, I really appreciate it. You're a sweet girl.